Welcome to the Trending XR podcast, where we discuss the latest in augmented reality, virtual reality, and AI with industry leaders who are shaping the future of how we will work, socialize, and go about our daily lives in the third dimension. In the not-so-distant future, we won't even be using phones. We'll be using these. I know, sounds crazy, but we have never been closer to this future concept becoming our current reality. I am so excited to share this new world with you. I hope to teach you, inspire you, and ignite your passion for extended reality. It's time to change dimensions. Are you coming? Welcome back to Trending XR podcast. Today's guest is the CEO of BlackBox Infinite, a leader in the volumetric sports broadcast space. They're the creative force behind Lapz, an immersive AR experience for F1 on the Apple Vision Pro. Let's get into it. I'd like to welcome on John LePore.
Hey, Cody. Thanks for having me here.
Oh, thank you for coming on. I'm very excited to talk to you about all the stuff that you guys have been working on. We can get started with maybe telling us about how you got started in the XR space. I know that you started in the VFX space in film. Similar to me, I do logistics for the film industry, and I'd love to hear that kind of crossover point where you found extended reality and were like, oh, this is something I really like to build something for.
Sure. So I got my start in a very specific field called motion design, effectively, animated graphic design content, combining a lot of like two-dimensional information and 3D animation together to do everything from like making sports scores appear during the NBA finals to making ads and commercials. And eventually found my way to a small studio in New York called Perception. And while I was working at Perception, I developed this particular fascination, or I would even say just obsession, with this sort of subgenre of work around creating the fictional technologies and gadgets and interfaces and holograms that you see in science fiction or superhero films. And getting into that space, to me, it's really exciting. It's really fascinating. I'm a huge technology geek, and I loved jumping in and designing these advanced and forward-thinking technologies, and had some amazing opportunities to do a bunch of work with Marvel Studios. Became one of Marvel Studios' go-to shops for all of this work that, like, in every single Marvel movie, there's, like, so much fictional technology that's depicted to either, make the world feel heightened and fantastical, or particularly to move the plot and the narrative along. Like there's so many different points in film where what could be 2 pages of exposition in the script can just be replaced by characters, pointing at a holographic map and just saying like, the bad guys are there, the good guys are there, there's an obstacle right here. And it's a great mechanism for conveying information in storytelling. So being in that space was always obsessed with the bleeding edge of real world technology. And I was particularly obsessive about trying to make sure that even when creating fictional tech, which could have zero constraints whatsoever, with trying to figure out, well, how do we make this as plausible as possible by working within some of the real world constraints or maybe slightly heightened versions of those constraints, and found that, being aware and treating this stuff as respectfully from an almost like user experience point of view rather than just like a concept art or visual effects mindset made things that I think were a little more respectful of the audiences who are technologically savvy, which, nowadays I think more than ever, people can go to the movies, point at tech on a screen and say like, oh, that's bullshit. Like computers don't really work like that. Like nobody has the words access denied appear in 144 point type from one side of the monitor to the other, right? Like that's just not like computers don't work like that in real life. Like, so was obsessed with that space and pretty quickly found that while working in fictional technologies, and I think the biggest breakthrough for me was creating a bunch of Tony Stark's gadgets in Iron Man 2. That almost immediately started bringing real world technology brands to the doorstep who would just basically say like, how can we help bridge the gap between our real world products and these very ambitious visions that we see in film and in fiction? And I found that to be really stimulating. There's others that I've encountered in my career who, love this space of fictional technology and thought of that as kind of that's the zenith, that's the peak of Mount Everest that you can be at with this work. But I just found this notion of trying to force that mindset into all of the crazy pragmatic constraints and challenges that there are with real world tech. I just found that really stimulating. I found that really, really fascinating. And so I don't know, I probably started making that transition back and forth between fiction and reality about 15 years ago. And that also sent me down a path where I was thrust into kind of user experience boot camp and also working in technology companies, seeing that there would be certain people who are really excited about the idea of like, we're bringing in the guy that made Tony Stark's gadgets to make our new tech. There would be some people in the room who would be thrilled. And then there would be maybe like a engineering based contingent in that same room who just looked like they wanted to murder me. Like they were just like, Are you serious? Like, we're bringing in this guy who makes a bunch of artwork and pretty pictures, and like that's going to be our product vision from now on? Like, what the hell? And so I found myself doing everything that I could to be as empathetic to, the human factors, the user experience, the sort of, quote unquote, design thinking of it all. And eventually, going back and forth between these two spaces, I found that working in real world tech was able to get more of that trust from the engineers and really sympathize and empathize with their concerns and the things that were important and critical to them, and then finding the balance of how do you still make sure that there's some magic or some really spectacular cinematic moments in an experience that executives would get very excited about and get very turned on by and say like, is that what our product's going to be like? Like, if you need any more resources or time or budget in order to guarantee that we'll hit that, like, no, go for
Just
it.
chuck it
And
at you.
so for me, that mindset was really powerful working on real world products. But it was also really powerful working in fiction as well. And so as I got further into my career and working in fiction, for me, a huge turning point was working on the film Black Panther. That started with just this simple brief of like, this movie takes place in this fictional world that must have the most advanced technology that's ever been seen in a movie before, right? And I mean, to me, that's an awesome brief. But it was also a huge responsibility, and that process for my team and I started not from making visual effects tests and concept art, but it started with us delivering almost like a series of, like, mini TED Talks to the director, Ryan Coogler, and the team of executives at Marvel about what was happening in the landscape of real world technology and how that could be applied to this film. And so that led to an experience where we had, and the film Black Panther is overflowing with futuristic technologies, many of which were designed by my team and I back at Perception. And those concepts were all grounded in real world logic and real world engineering principles. And that, resonated really well for the filmmakers. Like, they loved that. They loved that there was this layer to these concepts that wasn't just, it wasn't just colorful artwork. It wasn't just, or as I sometimes refer to it, as you see it in film, it's often just a bunch of glowing blue shit floating in the air, which is beautiful and made by incredible, super talented artists and creatives. But for me, it's always just been about, like, how can we make sure that when you see this stuff on screen, you also start to understand a little bit of the logic of, like, how it works and why it works. And so that mindset for me just became like this silver bullet, this, like, magic cheat code that helped whether I was working in fiction or working on real world technology initiatives. And I found myself drifting further away from, what could be thought of as like visual effects and user interface design, and just more into general strategic and creative consulting. And I developed a real appetite for that approach and being able to put together ideas that would push clients a little bit further with what they were putting together. And so that was the point that just motivated this transition from leading all of the creative at this wonderful studio in New York to building my own practice, BlackBox Infinite, which was put together to really stay obsessed with these spaces and these projects and these experiences that don't have existing best practices or templates for success. We love those spaces, but we also firmly believe that they need a very particular kind of touch to navigate your way through that. And it was also really critical to start Black Box, which was founded just a little more than 2 years ago, um, because we were entering a time period where it was very evident to me that we had a whole wave of new technologies and paradigms that were popping up that were kind of like shaking everybody in terms of like, well, what's the next big thing? Is it AI? Is it AI? Is it spatial? Is spatial the same thing as mixed reality? Like what are all of these different things that are falling out of the sky left and right? And it's a space that I adore. It's a space that I love. And I'm really excited that we're also at this point where to me it feels like reality is caught up to, and in many ways is even surpassing science fiction.
Mhm. Yeah, that was kinda like when you're talking about, how you were marrying a lot of these ideas as a VFX person. um, I was thinking it's sci-fi. I heard this quote not too long ago. I love it. It's like sci-fi is having a hard time staying fiction. We're having all of these wonderful ideas that come out of these like conceptual movie, like sci-fi ideas, and they're turning them into real products. So it's like this. I feel like we're seeing more and more of like products from movies, like ideas like the Tony Stark helmet. People are like turning it into a real thing. And like AR used to be just a sci-fi idea. Now it's a real thing. VR, you can go back and name a ton of stuff. And it's really cool how they kind of married each other. So you're talking about how you brought some of like real world tech into films to make it more believable, and to take some of that stuff from film that was not real and make it into something that is real now. And I think it's such a cool kind of back and forth that technologists have and the creatives have, that we see come out of like the film industry a lot. So it's really interesting time now to see all of these technology parts, like all these little pieces that have been developed for like a decade now, are all coming together to make these things happen. So it's just like a really cool time, like you said, to be alive, to like be experiencing science fiction as reality. It's really really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Why did you choose the name Black Box for your company?
So the name Black Box, it took us a while to land at the name Black Box, and we were even briefly doing business with a completely separate name that we tossed aside once we landed at Black Box. And there's a few different layers to it. We have an inherent challenge with our business, which is that so much of the work that we do is currently and may forever be extremely confidential, and that we can't share with the world, and we can't have a densely populated portfolio of all of the, innovations and engagements that we've had with our clients. And so for us, black box, a term typically used in scientific circles to describe a scenario where you have something that goes in and something that comes out, but you don't understand exactly how that happened or what was
Schrodinger's
going on
box.
inside that space. To us was an appropriate metaphor. There's always also things like the highly secure, black box data recorder of an aircraft or whatnot, right?
Yeah, it's
Um,
cool.
what nailed it for us, what cemented it, was that my co-founder Jared Yeater and I discovered almost accidentally that we both had an unusually intense affection for a mostly forgotten film from the mid 90s called Sneakers. It is, in my opinion, the greatest movie about like technology and like
I've never heard of it.
hackers that has ever been made. It has an incredible cast. It's like Robert Redford and River Phoenix and Sidney Poitier and Dan Aykroyd and it's an Ben Kingsley is in the movie,
I'm gonna have
and
to
it
watch this.
was, I think it's 1992 or
Yeah, I was
so.
2. Yeah, I was just born.
It is this unbelievably, like, sober view of what it meant to be a hacker or someone that is basically abusing what technology is possible of. And in the film, there's a special MacGuffin. There is this device that is a decoder that's de-encrypting, many important, signals that are out there in the world, and they through the film, they just refer to the device as the black box.
Okay.
And so for us, it's our tribute to what I think is like the best hacker movie ever made, and is also, I think, ties in nicely with our ethos. I mean, like, I like a lot of movies that touch on technology, but they get really corny really fast. And it's amazing to me that this film from 1992 was made with such a measured amount of restraint and control, and was so thoughtful about the subject matter that just like 3 or 4 years later, there'd be movies called like The Net and things like that, right? And this film, because of its sober outlook on this space, the movie is timeless and it holds up incredibly well today. So
Sneakers.
Sneakers, you
Yeah,
must see.
I
5
will. Yeah, I'll
stars,
probably
2
watch it
thumbs
tonight,
up.
actually. I'm a big sci-fi guy. I haven't seen probably a lot of like pre-90s or early 90s stuff I haven't seen sci-fi wise. I gotta go back and do some retroactive watching, but I love sci-fi films. They're like, I think they're probably my favorite of the bunch. Um, but I like the name. It's really cool, and I love that you guys have like a really nice connective story to that. And on your website, the interactive, was that like 3D JS file of like the black box? You can like
Uh-huh.
interact with it. It's really cool. I thought that was a nice touch to your site design.
Thanks, Cody.
Yeah, I really wanted to talk to you about Lapz. I know it's like the XR like industry's buzz. I'm a huge fan of it. When I first found it, I was like, oh my god, dude, this is it. Like, this is it's the future for XR. We're gonna be watching like stuff in 3D on our tabletops. I thought that was the coolest concept. And I have loads of questions, but um, I'd like to start with kind of like the beginning of Labs, if you don't mind talking about it. Um, I'd like to maybe if you could start with, let's see, can you talk to us kind of like the from conception to kind of like when you decided to make it into a product. I know this was part of like an experience or a competition for F1, and you won an award. And I think Lewis Hamilton gave you an award himself, which was like super cool to watch the video on that. I bet that was an awesome experience. I think we'd love to hear the story behind Laps.
Sure. So, through my whole career, I've been working on a lot of different ways of thinking of, XR, mixed reality, augmented reality, um, whether that's in film or with some of the very earliest real augmented reality products that are out there in the world. One of the most major of which was doing like some of the early interaction designs for and whatnot. Um, Huge fan of this space, really intensely obsessed with it. And I'm also obsessed a bit with the world of cartography, digital cartography, and just maps in general, and
Yeah.
how we relate to the geographical world around us through digital maps, and have spent a bit of time working in that space with a few really exciting clients. And in 2018, I stumbled across the Formula One Innovation Prize, which was a contest sponsored by a few different Formula One teams, as well as some of the team's formal sponsors and Formula One, the sport themselves, who basically just put out a call saying, submit ideas or proposals for ways that we could enhance the future of the way that F1 is broadcast to fans. And I remember mentioning this to a couple of my coworkers at the time that I was putting together a proposal for this contest. And they were like, oh, that's not even fair. Like, that's like the wheelhouse inside your wheelhouse. I'm a lifelong Formula One super junkie, absolutely obsessed with the sport. And to me, it's a huge source of inspiration for that kind of like blend of engineering and what's possible with science and how that also translates to the world of design. So I jumped in, I put together a pretty rich and complex proposal for this contest, submitted it, and I was absolutely delighted to be one of 5 global finalists in the contest. Was flown out to Austin, Texas to attend the United States Grand Prix, and had the most VIP life-changing experience of, getting tours of the garage, having, one of Lewis Hamilton's engineers, give me personally, a tour of his car and point out every single detail that you couldn't even possibly capture on TV. Was absolutely over the moon, for this. And so part of this concept was this idea of using augmented reality to be able to see a dimensional racetrack and to be able to see real-time telemetry represented on that track. Um, the With that contest, I was absolutely gutted that I got second place. I was so excited about this idea and this approach, and I was maybe even a bit overconfident in this idea. I was really hoping to win the $50,000 grand prize, and I didn't. I came in second place. I was kind of bummed about that, but I still had an unforgettable and like life-changing experience just being part of that competition. So started thinking about this idea again as the Apple Vision Pro was about to be released. Was really excited about the Apple Vision Pro. It's not the only augmented reality headset in the world, but to me, just the fact that it's coming from Apple means that there's going to be a bigger investment behind it. There's going to be a bigger kind of push culturally for this to be something that arrives on people's radar and for them to understand that there's a new, very different kind of technology that could really impact and change things. And so just as the Vision Pro was about to be released, I figured it was the perfect time to revisit this concept. And I put together a prototype for it, worked really hard on just figuring out and mapping out what are the different features, what are the different details or nuances of this experience that would be relevant here, and put it together in the way that I often start a prototyping process with our clients, which is just like, what's the fastest way to get this idea out there in a consumable form, which typically is, rather than starting by programming and coding a full experience, is to make what we describe as like a cinematic prototype, where you're using visual effects techniques and processes to take designs and concepts and create, a video prototype that explains everything and how it works and functions. I worked closely with one of my longtime collaborators, Sanu Sagar, who helped me with a lot of the different components of this. And we put together this video. We also told a bit of the story behind it in putting it out there. We thought it was very important that people understood that although this is a cinematic prototype, it's not just magic. It's not just pure imagination. It's built around all these real world constraints and also the real world opportunities. And so for me, this was also a way to showcase that, like, this amazing piece of hardware, this Apple Vision Pro headset, very expensive piece of tech, creates some high expectations when you're putting a $3,500 headset on. And I had high expectations for it too. I mean, it's a device that when you put it on, you could hallucinate anything you could imagine. And I was deeply frustrated that all the examples, all the demos, all the things that I was seeing out there in the world were like, strap this $3,500 piece of kit to your face and use it to view a bunch of rounded rectangles floating in space. And to me, I felt that that was just like, it was just undervaluing what was really possible here. So, Formula One, you've got geographic locations that we already have all sorts of geospatial data for,
Yeah.
right?
I think this was my next question is
And
why
we
F1 is
have,
so perfect for this, yeah. Data-wise, yeah.
I mean, it's a perfect fit because you've got these locations. You've got locations that are fantastical, locations that many people will never have the opportunity to visit Abu Dhabi or Singapore or Monaco in their life. But to take the geospatial data of those locations and bring it to you wherever you are in the world, and to combine that with real-time telemetry, which is not some new thing that Formula One is bending over backwards to generate. It's something that's just been a natural part of the
Right.
sport for decades
And it's
now.
rich. They track so much data on the cars. Yeah, that's what's really cool about F1 is it's got all of the stuff that you need to make like a super rich experience data-wise to drive all of these visuals. And that's like I think that's why F1 is just like is the perfect sport right now to build like something like what you guys have done.
And it's emblematic of where the sport sits. A big part of my fascination with the sport is that it's not just purely about the athletes or the drivers themselves, and there's a huge exciting
Yeah.
component to that. But Formula One is also at all times, Formula One is a space race. It's a engineering competition,
Yeah.
which doesn't exist effectively in any other sport. And so you get these
Not really. No.
pinnacles of feats of engineering and science and technology that are part of it. So to me, all of those things wove together as a really perfect fit. So we put this prototype out there into the world. Um, I was very, passionate about the idea and confident that it would resonate, within my own immediate sort of circles of innovation and maybe even crossover into the motorsport world. But I was honestly quite taken aback that it went mega viral. And just this concept that we put together, it appeared everywhere. And within about a week, it was being reposted by ESPN, by every major sports outlet. Marquez Brownlee featured our prototype in 3 separate videos that he's made on his YouTube channel. If you're not familiar with Marquez, he's like probably the most critical, like, tech product tastemaker that's out there at the moment. And we saw this just, go spread like wildfire. We saw a lot of different entities, uh, appreciating the concept. We saw many people creating sort of like copycat versions of it or tailoring it to other use cases. Which when I say copycat, I mean, don't get me wrong. This concept is it's a very almost obvious sort of conclusion to arrive at in a certain sense, but we were thrilled to just see it resonating all over the place, and was particularly excited to see that there were multiple different teams of developers who took it upon themselves to start just making their own interactive prototypes of this experience. One of those teams was an amazing group of developers who started putting together this beta product called Lapz. And when we saw it and we saw the level of quality and the level of evolution that it was going through, we were impressed. And so we teamed up with this team creating this product and have been helping them with their future vision for the experience, with their further roadmap. And it's been amazing to see this concept, this, prototype, this idea become a fully functioning experience. And if you are a motorsports fan and you put this thing on, there's no going back. Like, you immediately are having this experience that's, completely different than just watching a race on television. I mean, you look down at your coffee table and see this full volumetric model of the racetrack and the surrounding, environment around it. Like, it's basically like a slice of reality from somewhere else on the globe has just been dropped onto your coffee table, and you're seeing the events that are playing out thousands of miles away live before your eyes on your table. It is, and obviously I'm biased, but, like, I still, when I put on the headset and I use it, this may sound cheesy, but, like, I immediately am like, "Oh my god, like, this is it. This is the Tony Stark technology, right? This is what we've been promised in fiction, and we're finally experiencing it in a way that's practical." And at the same exact time, it's nothing like Tony Stark or science fiction because it's so surprisingly natural and obvious. And it starts tapping into, like, when you were a little kid and if you had that rug with the road, printed on the rug and playing with
Yeah.
little tiny toy cars on it. It feels almost a little bit like that.
Yeah, it's
And it
magic. It's
just
super cool.
and it reinforces for me the broader potential that there is with augmented reality, spatial computing, XR, whatever you wanna call it. It's taking computing and it's merging it into the real world in a way where it becomes so much more natural than I think we ever expected it to be after spending years using mice and keyboards and even touch screens to
Yeah.
interact with things. It pushes things to this, like, shockingly natural and obvious sort of level.
Yeah, being able to use your hands is, like, so amazing to be able to just have hand gesturing or grab something and pinch it and make it bigger. I think, like, maybe this was a feature I saw with Lapz where you could, like, touch a car and, like,
Yeah.
like a information table will pop up with, like, the driver, their speed, their lap times, like, it's so cool, like, all of these different things that you can add to this experience to make it just so magical, but it's I think that, like, extra touch of what makes it so cool is that it's in your natural environment, and that's why I'm such a huge backer of AR. Like, VR is great, but I'm there's something special to me about being able to see something that is hyper realistic and has, like, all these lovely gizmos and gadgets and things you can press and interact with, and it just captures your attention, and it feels so real because you're seeing, like, your natural room that you see every day around it. I just to me, that is, like, the pinnacle of just tech and cool experiences that you can have, like, on the market. I don't know anything else that I find as interesting as it's so cool.
Yeah, it's, and to me, I see never-ending
Yeah.
applications and use cases for it. And I'm almost frustrated at the moment that we're in right now because the tech is amazing. Vision Pro and some of the Meta headsets, it's mind-boggling how many sensors and systems are packed into these things, but they're still unwieldy, they're still a little bit uncomfortable, they're still heavy, they're still not something that you're going to walk out of the house wearing, and that almost crushes me a little bit because so many of the best use cases for augmented reality are outside of our home or office or our most familiar spaces. It's when you're navigating places where you don't know everything inside and out, and how
Yeah.
much information that's just in the environment could help you, could guide you, could provide really powerful advantages for you. And so, to me, there's just this perpetual friction between where we are in the moment and where, I'm hoping that we'll arrive at as quickly as possible.
I think we're getting close. I've been following this for some time, and I just like where we're at now is just blowing away where we started. And I think AI and machine learning and advancements in a lot of like the internal tech for like you've seen Meta Orion's like they're growing their own silicon, or is it silicon carbide, whatever the glass I think is that they etch waveguides on. Like they're able to achieve things that we just never were able to until now. And it's like it's really fun to watch as an engineering fan, the technical side of things, just seeing like the maturity of some of these parts of the tech that are making what we're seeing now even capable. And I just imagine that over the next 5 years, we're going to see that capacity to be able to have a more a frictionless path towards creating and being able to go out in our environment with AR and just go hog wild with all the different types of experiences that we could build with it. Because like you said, it truly is limitless. It is limited to your creativity, and I think that is what's so incredible about this technology is it's going to change so many lives in so many ways, in new ways, and open up experiences for humanity that we haven't even had yet. Which I think is maybe the coolest part of AR is like there's gonna be experiences you'll have that we haven't yet experienced as humanity. That to me, that's like that's super cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I always describe it as like we're right now in the sort of like Apple Newton phase of this technology. Like the Apple Newton was a device that was like it's a device that could kind of fit in your pocket almost, that you can use to blend your schedule and your notes and maybe do some email or maybe even some very basic browsing of the internet. And it just like every different aspect of it was like almost there. And when you describe that, you're like, oh, that sounds like a primitive iPhone. And that's exactly what it was. But it took another 10 years before you had this much more elegant and integrated device that was taking some of those promises and making them much easier to integrate into our life. And even with the iPhone, like even when the iPhone was first available and the App Store was a new thing, like the number one selling app was an image of a glass of beer. And when you would tip the phone, the accelerometers would make the beer like pour out of
Yeah,
the,
I remember that.
the virtual drinking glass. And that was the number one app. Like that was like,
Right.
look at what you can do with this amazing piece of tech. And it took a little while before we got to like, oh, you could use this device to immediately request a vehicle to come to where you are right now and take you anywhere that you need to go. And how, powerful these applications and use cases were. And I feel that we won't really even come close to scratching the surface of what's possible with these things until they're much more heavily adopted. They're much more integrated into our everyday lives. And that may take a bit of time, but when we do, there are going to be use cases that, we couldn't even possibly predict today.
Yeah, I would love to. I'm an optimist, so like I think sub 10 years we'll get some decent large scale adoption for AR glasses. I know Meta's plan is to release the Orions within a 2 year period, roughly. There's still some tech that needs to advance, but I think that we'll have something pretty cool within sub 10 years, and I'm so excited to have that feature. Um, and hopefully, like these lightweight smart glasses that are coming out will kind of be like the toe dip or the Trojan horse to start separating consumers from their phones and being more okay with wearing their tech on their face and being hands free. And I think that like maybe that'll help us, guide the populace into full on, fully enclosed AR glasses, which I think are going to truly revolutionize humanity in so many cool ways. That's what I'm most excited for. I'm trying to be patient, but I'm hoping that it happens. The curve of which that happens is faster than some of the previous tech that we've seen in the world.
And, there's a lot of it that has to do with, the material science of how do you package things together into a small and comfortable space. But there is
Yeah.
another component, which is just like, you never know. There could be a scenario where these things become surprisingly more socially accepted in a way that we can't predict. I mean, I was looking the other day at I think it's the big screen headset, big screen
Hmm.
headset number 2 or whatnot, and it's so compact,
Yeah.
and it is still it occludes your eyes completely, but it's and they do a thing where they put a transparent lens on the outside of it so you can see all the innards. And I looked at it, I was just thinking like, "Oh, man, that actually looks kinda sick." Like, there is somewhere in the fashion world, there's somebody that's like, "Oh, yeah, we need someone to wear this while walking on the runway because it just looks," and I'm a little bit over, like, cyberpunk aesthetics, but it nails that perfectly and
Yeah.
just feels pretty rad.
That's I'm very, very curious. I'm very, very curious what the Catalyst app is gonna be. Like, what's the one is it a social app? Is it gonna be a workplace app or it's how you interact with your environment, navigation, something that comes out is gonna captivate the populace are like, "Oh, I have to get a pair of augmented reality glasses so I can experience that." Everyone's looking at something, you're like, "What are you doing?" And you're like, "Well, you just gotta go buy a pair of glasses and find out." I'm so curious what that's gonna be. I'm pretty excited to hopefully be around for that whenever
Yep.
that comes in the space. So we're getting low on time here, but I'd like to ask you, so given your experience, where do you see spatial computing heading in the next 5 to 10 years? And what roles do you think like companies like BlackBox Infinite will play into that evolution?
Sure. So over the next 10 years, I think it's just about this march towards adoption, towards people understanding the technology and its capabilities a little bit better. And I do see Black Box playing a really important role in that. I think we find to us, and especially spending so much time obsessing over this tech through the lens of fiction and playing a lot of time, spending a lot of time over years before these things were even possible, spending a lot of time mapping out like what would you use it for? How would you use it? How would it work? What would be some of the constraints or limitations or whatnot? To us, we find, and I'm sure to you as well, and many others in circles that we're in, we find certain uses or ways that the technology can be leveraged to be very obvious. And I have to keep reminding myself that to many others, it's still extraordinarily novel, that they have no point of reference for what this tech is capable of, have maybe never even used it themselves in any sort of practical way. And so our mission with Black Box is to get people and brands and strategists and innovators and leaders within organizations to get out of the sort of space of like, oh, I watched a 3D video on a headset of someone tightrope walking and it was really immersive and exciting, and really start steering them towards the ways that these things can be integrated into our everyday lives and the ways that these things can improve and change experiences in ways that we didn't know was possible because we are so trained on digital content and information is contained within a rectangle or a screen. And, right now, so many of the things that we're seeing, they feel like they're pushing boundaries because they're like, well, now there can be screens behind the other screens, or there can be depth within those windows, or you can go to a virtual space where there's, file cabinets that you're physically opening to find your information. And it's just like, no, 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 no. That's not making anything better. That's still just tinkering and playing with what the capabilities of the hardware are. And I do think there's a really critical kind of overlap between culture and our human needs and the way that this tech can just be applied to our everyday lives in ways that will just continue to surprise us. And I think we'll then, that curve will get pretty aggressive in terms of we'll start to understand like, oh, there's actually just very obvious ways for like, oh, what would be the most natural thing that could fit in my space or be related to the space that I'm in and already used to using my space in certain ways and whatnot. It's just so fascinating to me that we're taking technology and effectively like, we're breaking it out of the device and we're just putting it like into our lives. And I know it sounds like I'm on drugs when I'm describing it that way, but like it is that's the way that's what this tech unlocks. And there's gonna be some things that aren't like wacky games or entertainment experiences, but there's going to be things that just change the way that we understand the world around us.
Yeah, I think
And,
that's an excellent.
our grandkids are gonna be like, "Gosh, screens? That must have been so frustrating. That must have been so limiting. That must have been so one-dimensional in terms of, what was possible."
Yeah, I think that's an excellent answer to that. And tagging off that in closing, do you have any books or websites or very standout recommendations? Maybe even people that you think people should our listeners should go follow or check
Sorry,
out.
I wish I had a better list prepared because there are a lot of amazing folks that are out there in this space that I think are worthy of following and listening to. I think, the biggest thing that I broadcast out there is that there's just a lot of, for lack of a better term, sort of like haters to this space. And like when an entity like Apple jumps into this space, there's a lot of people that are very eager to look at something like Apple Vision Pro and declare it a failure. And I think it's important that you understand that like, oh, this is still extremely experimental. This is still very early days. This is not we're nowhere near this being the next iPhone. And so kind of like, temper temper your expectations, but start now building all the groundwork for what's going to be a really powerful paradigm. And then in terms of books, I just acquired this book and it's been really fascinating so far.
Game
It's
feel.
Steve Swink. The book is called Game Feel,
Cool.
and it's about a topic that I think is really important, which in gaming is just like, what are you doing to capture the very intangible, like, sense of, like, feel? Not not feel in terms of mood or aesthetics, but how do you make interactions feel pleasing, feel gratifying, feel satisfying? And I think that's gonna take on a whole new meaning in the world of spatial and augmented reality.
That sounds really cool. I'll pick that up. I always buy every book that my guest recommends. I got a whole stack over here I'm trying to work through, but I will link that in the description as well as BlackBox Infinite's website if you want to check them out. And if you have anyone you want to send me over after this, I can also link any other book recommendations or people that you think people should follow that are pretty cool.
Awesome. Thank you, Cody.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. I appreciate your time, and I really look forward to doing a subsequent podcast to do follow up.
Yeah, let's geek out some more.
Sounds good. Thank you, John.